Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Before we get started, I want to congratulate President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. I'm looking forward to working with them both on the common challenges and opportunities facing our countries and our world. Canada and the United States have a unique relationship, and this bond will always be the strong foundation on which we build our shared future. I also want to take a moment to reflect on the historic milestone reached in this election. For so many people in Canada and around the world, seeing a woman, a Black and South Asian American woman, elected as the next Vice President of the United States is an inspiration and a reminder that everyone's voice belongs in politics. I also want to take a moment to address the current situation with COVID-19. This morning, Canadians woke up to very encouraging news from Pfizer and BioNTech about their vaccine candidate. Canada signed a deal with them in August to secure millions of doses. At the same time, we're also seeing other vaccine candidates progressing well. In Canada and around the world, scientists are working very hard and doing a great job. We hope to see vaccines landing in the early next year. But between now and then, it's really, really important that we double down on our efforts. We need to make sure we are controlling the spread of COVID-19 in the coming months so that when vaccines get here, we will be able to act quickly to protect all Canadians. And to be very clear, if you catch COVID in the coming days and weeks, a vaccine won't help you or your family. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. We are hopeful we are getting there because our scientists are working incredibly hard. But we need to do our part. We need to stay strong and hang in there a few more months. Maybe more than that, but we can see it coming. So download the COVID Alert app. Keep your distances. Reduce your gatherings to essential members of your family, and follow local public health advice. That's how we'll get through this winter to a spring and a summer that will be much better, I promise. Ce matin, je suis heureux d'être ici en compagnie des ministres Monsef et Bains, ainsi que des ministres McKenna et Rodriguez. À chaque jour, ces ministres, tout comme l'ensemble de notre équipe, travaillent à bâtir des communautés plus fortes. Over the last few months, our daily routines have changed. People are working from home. Kids are doing classes from the kitchen table. And we're all going online to stay in touch with family and friends. Now, more than ever, a video chat cutting out during a meeting or a connection that's too slow to upload a school assignment, that's not just a hassle, it's a barrier. Just ask Hervé from Rocky Harbour, Newfoundland and Labrador. She's an artisan who moved part of her shop, the Glass Station, online to continue reaching customers during the pandemic. If Hervé didn't have access to good internet, it would limit her options. But because she can get online, she's taking her business to a whole new level. Good, reliable internet isn't a luxury. It's a basic service. And it's a service that every single Canadian deserves. That's why over the last 5 years, we've invested to connect 1.2 million households to high-speed internet. To put it in perspective, over 10 years, the previous government invested about $700 million in connecting people to the internet. Over the past 5 years, we've invested over $6 billion for the coming decade, which is nearly 10 times as much per year on average. We've made important progress, but there are more people still to reach. So today, we're taking another big step forward. Our government is launching the $1.75 billion Universal Broadband Fund to connect all Canadians to high-speed internet. This fund will be used to build infrastructure across the country almost entirely in rural and remote communities. And for places that are just too far to reach, including in remote areas in the north, we've reached a $600 million agreement with Telesat for satellite capacity to improve broadband. Along with the $2 billion we've already put down for broadband through the Canada Infrastructure Bank's growth plan, we're making real investments in Canadians, in their success, and in their future. Dans le monde d'aujourd'hui, un accès Internet n'est pas un luxe, mais plutôt un service essentiel. Prenez par exemple Lise de Pike River au Québec. C'est une aînée qui a maintenant accès à la fibre optique dans Brome-Missisquoi grâce aux investissements de notre gouvernement. Elle peut donc demeurer en contact avec sa famille et ses proches tout en restant en sécurité chez elle. En plus, son fils qui habite avec elle peut maintenant travailler de la maison. C'est ça l'importance de l'Internet haute vitesse. On veut que tout le monde puisse en profiter, comme Lise et sa famille. Voilà pourquoi notre gouvernement lance aujourd'hui le Fonds pour la large bande universelle, un investissement de 1,75 milliard de dollars qui a pour but de fournir un accès Internet haute vitesse à tous les Canadiens. D'un bout à l'autre du pays, le fonds servira à bâtir des infrastructures, surtout dans les communautés rurales. Et en ce qui concerne les endroits éloignés qui sont difficiles d'accès comme les régions nordiques, nous avons conclu un accord de 600 millions de dollars avec Telesat pour améliorer la capacité de l'accès à large bande par satellite. Avec les plus de 2 milliards de dollars qu'on a investis dans la Banque de l'infrastructure pour la connectivité, l'annonce d'aujourd'hui représente un véritable investissement dans les Canadiens, dans leur réussite et dans leur avenir. Today's investment puts us on track to get 98% of Canadians connected to high-speed internet in the next few years, and everyone connected a few years after that. These are ambitious targets, and we're ready to meet them. In fact, to accelerate our progress right now, we're making $150 million of the Universal Broadband Fund available immediately. As we support people through this pandemic and rebuild a strong, resilient economy, getting Canadians connected is yet another tool in the toolbox. I want to recognize the hard work of so many members of our team, especially our rural caucus, who led the way on universal broadband. From Goody Hutchins to Lynn Bessette, from Stéphane Lauzon to Larry Bagnell, across the country, this Liberal team is focused on what communities need to succeed. Pour rebâtir une économie forte et résiliente, il faut que tout le monde ait les outils nécessaires pour réussir. Comme en témoigne notre engagement à créer 1 million d'emplois et nos nouvelles mesures de soutien pour les petites entreprises, nous continuons de concentrer nos efforts à répondre aux besoins des Canadiens maintenant et pour l'avenir. Merci. C'est avec grand plaisir que je cède maintenant la parole à la ministre Monsef. Maryam.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. Hello, colleagues. Bonjour, Anin, salam alaikum. The program we're launching today is the product of Canadians' inputs and efforts. It reflects their advice and their recommendations on how best to solve the most important infrastructure challenge of our time, how best to strengthen our connections. Canadians, especially those living in rural communities, asked us to design a program that is flexible to address their diverse needs, to include backbone, last mile, and cell service. They asked for a rapid response stream for projects that can connect communities faster. They asked us to ensure our investments are future-proofed and keep up with the ever-evolving technologies. They asked for greater support in form of a Pathfinder service so that applicants can easily navigate this complex process. They asked us to learn from the past and build on the significant progress our government's already made to connect Canadians. Including today's announcements, we are advancing programs and projects that will connect 3 million Canadians to better, faster internet. Today, we're delivering on a program that Canadians asked for. This plan is a key part of our response to COVID-19, and it is where our economic recovery from the pandemic begins. It will provide access to telehealth in underserved communities. It will help students and teachers with online learning. It will improve safety and security on lonely roads and highways. It will give people the ability to call for and receive emergency help. It will strengthen our local businesses on main streets, allow for work from home, and create more Canadian jobs. It will keep us connected with loved ones in long-term care homes and across the country. Our plan will be delivered in the short term, not the long term. We will partner with provinces, territories, Métis, Inuit, First Nations communities, private sector, and the nonprofit to connect people immediately and position us for the future. To respond to the immediate COVID-19 connectivity needs, the Universal Broadband Fund will launch in two parallel streams. The $150 million rapid response stream will support shovel-ready projects that can deliver immediate results. Government officials stand ready to assess applications as we receive them. Let me take this opportunity to thank my team who's worked around the clock to make this possible. The core Universal Broadband Fund will support large strategic projects of impact, including $50 million for mobile projects to primarily benefit Indigenous communities. My colleagues and I are determined to see this program rolled out expeditiously. Our number one priority now is to encourage and support strong applications to connect every corner of this country. Applicants are encouraged to call 1-800-328-6189 to receive personalized support for their application. COVID hasn't created the need for increased connectivity, but it has added urgency to this work. Our connections have been our biggest strength in response to COVID. They've allowed us to meet the crisis head-on. Stronger connections for all Canadians will drive our economic recovery in the post-pandemic world and will keep our country united. The road ahead will not be easy, but we will get through it together. Merci.
Merci, Maryam, and bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone, and it's great to be here with my colleagues, and I want to particularly acknowledge Minister Monsef, who has worked tirelessly on this project and role as the minister responsible for rural economic development. Thank you for your leadership, and I'm also delighted to be here with my colleagues, Minister Rodriguez and Minister McKenna, and of course, thank you, Prime Minister, for the news of this major investment in Canadian satellite communications. It's an investment that respects the first principle of Canada's digital charter that we introduced in 2019, and that is around universal access. C'est un investissement qui va aider à combler le fossé numérique entre les communautés urbaines et les communautés rurales et éloignées. And it's an investment that is inspired as much by social responsibility as it is by economic success. If the social change of the past few months has taught us anything, is that we need to be more mindful of the experience and voices of all Canadians, regardless of where they live, their economic circumstances, their gender, or the color of their skin. And if the COVID-19 restrictions have taught us anything, is that access to high-speed internet is absolutely essential for all Canadians, as more and more of us work and learn from home. Nous sommes déterminés à faire en sorte que 100% des Canadiens aient accès à Internet haute vitesse. Et l'annonce aujourd'hui est la voie à suivre pour y arriver. But Canada is a big country, and our geography presents challenges to building networks. With this investment, we are ensuring that Canadians in the most rural and remote parts of Canada can have access to high-speed, reliable broadband access from a low Earth orbit or LEO satellite constellation that operates at less than 2,000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth compared to the 36,000 kilometers for the traditional geostationary satellites. Providing Canadians with access to high-speed internet will help close gaps caused by geography. L'accès à Internet haute vitesse, c'est aussi un accès égal à la santé, à l'éducation et aux emplois au sein de l'économie numérique. And perhaps most importantly, we cannot, in good conscience, leave our fellow Canadians in rural and remote communities on the periphery. And I'm proud to say that today's investment to secure low Earth orbit satellite capacity will go a long way in addressing those challenges, particularly for those really remote and rural communities. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And over to you, Minister McKenna.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'll be brief. The pandemic has made the government's commitment to connect all Canadians to high-speed internet more important than ever. The Canada Infrastructure Bank recently announced its growth plan, which includes a $2 billion broadband initiative that will help accelerate connectivity in Canada by developing and delivering large-scale, high-impact projects, including through a partnership with the Universal Broadband Fund. The Canada Infrastructure Bank's investments in broadband will connect more than 750,000 households and businesses in underserved communities, improving lives and creating good jobs. Les investissements de la Banque d'infrastructure du Canada dans le domaine de la large bande permettront de connecter plus de 3/4 de millions de ménages et d'entreprises dans des communautés mal desservies, améliorant ainsi la qualité de vie des gens et créant de bons emplois. Just last month, the Canada Infrastructure Bank announced its investment in a major irrigation project in southern Alberta that will help producers grow food more efficiently with the same water resources. So what we're seeing from the Canada Infrastructure Bank is action, progress, and ambition to create jobs and build a stronger, more sustainable, and more connected economy. When I was appointed Minister of Infrastructure and Communities just under a year ago, the Prime Minister mandated me to ensure that this publicly funded Crown Corporation fully lives up to its promise to make our tax dollars go further by drawing in private capital and getting more important infrastructure built for Canadians. Nous avons nommé Michael Sabia, président du conseil d'administration. La banque a engagé un nouveau PDG dynamique, Aaron Corey. Et maintenant, la banque se lance à plein régime dans un plan de croissance de 10 milliards de dollars sur 3 ans qui devrait créer au moins 60 000 emplois. These are exactly the kinds of projects our government envisioned when we stood up the bank in 2017. I look forward to the Canada Infrastructure Bank helping sustain more Canadian jobs and growth with further investments in the days and months ahead. Merci. Thank you. Now over to Minister Rodriguez.
Salut tout le monde, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Maryam, Catherine, Navdeep. Je suis vraiment heureux d'être avec vous ce matin. Cet été, j'ai fait le tour du Québec pour prendre le pouls de nos régions, que ce soit de Deux-Montagnes, Saguenay, en passant par Saint-Hyacinthe, Trois-Rivières. Les Québécois m'ont raconté ce qu'on a bien fait, puis aussi ce qu'on pouvait améliorer. Et on m'a répété régulièrement que l'accès à Internet haute vitesse, c'est une priorité absolue dans nos régions. Je pense à Jean Fortin de Baie-Saint-Paul, à Claudette Simard de Charlevoix qui m'ont expliqué qu'en ce moment, il y a comme 2 classes de citoyens. Il y a les enfants qui peuvent aller à l'école virtuellement et ceux qui ne peuvent pas. Il y a les parents qui peuvent travailler de la maison et ceux qui ne peuvent pas. Alors, je pense à Sylvie Provost à Harrington, et je me souviens très bien de notre rencontre pour qui elle me disait que c'est beaucoup plus difficile pour son entreprise, l'auberge Val-Carole, d'aller chercher des clients. Et ce que je leur dis, c'est à Jean, à Claudette, à Sylvie, à tous les autres, bien, on vous a entendu. Alors, aujourd'hui, mes collègues et le Premier ministre l'ont dit, on investit 1,75 milliard de dollars pour brancher encore plus rapidement le Québec, l'ensemble du pays à Internet haute vitesse avec le nouveau fonds pour la large bande universelle. On avait promis, rappelez-vous, de connecter tout le monde d'ici 2030 et on était bien parti pour atteindre l'objectif, mais vous nous avez dit, bien, c'est pas assez vite. Alors, on va accélérer ça. On va mettre les bouchées doubles pour brancher presque tous les Québécois d'ici 2026, soit 4 ans plus tôt que prévu. Et en plus, bien, on ajoute un volet rapide à notre investissement. Ça, c'est 150 millions de dollars qui vont aller directement à des projets réalisables d'ici 1 an. Ça, ce que ça veut dire, c'est des projets qui seront terminés d'ici 1 an. Et évidemment, On va travailler avec l'ensemble de nos partenaires. Je pense au gouvernement du Québec et à tant d'autres pour régler les problèmes qui ralentissent notre travail, comme l'accès au poteau, par exemple. Ça, c'est quelque chose qu'on a entendu régulièrement à travers le Québec. Au début de la pandémie, on avait promis de laisser personne derrière. Maintenant qu'on vit sur le numérique pour relancer notre économie, bien, on n'acceptera pas que nos régions puissent pas participer. C'est hors de question. Alors qu'on habite à Québec, en Estrie, en Abitibi, en Mauricie ou ailleurs, bien, il faut avoir accès à Internet haute vitesse, ça c'est clair. Et on n'arrêtera pas nos efforts. On n'arrêtera pas nos efforts tant aussi longtemps que tout le monde ne sera pas connecté. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le ministre Rodriguez. On va commencer aujourd'hui la période de questions pour le premier ministre d'une durée de 20 minutes avec le téléphone, suivi des questions dans la salle. Les ministres resteront disponibles pour 15 minutes par la suite pour répondre à d'autres questions. The Prime Minister will be available for 20 minutes answering questions, starting with the phone, following with questions in the room. Ministers will remain available for more questions afterward. Opérateur, première question.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 for questions. Faites étoile 1, s'il vous plaît, pour des questions. Première question, l'Inaudible, la presse canadienne. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Au sujet de l'élection américaine, vous avez déjà félicité Monsieur Biden. Monsieur Trump n'a pas encore concédé la victoire. Avez-vous parlé trop vite? Et sinon, qu'est-ce que vous pouvez y faire du fait que Monsieur Trump semble s'accrocher?
D'abord, nous faisons confiance dans le processus électoral américain et j'ai été content de féliciter le président élu Biden en fin de semaine. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec l'administration actuelle jusqu'en fin janvier et suite à ça, on va travailler avec la nouvelle administration, évidemment. Ce sera mon 3e président américain. Je pense que tout au fil des années, on a démontré notre capacité et notre emphase sur d'être là pour défendre les intérêts des Canadiens. As I've said, we have confidence in the American electoral process as it has unfolded. I was pleased to congratulate President-elect Biden on the weekend. We will continue to work with the current American administration until January 20th. After which we'll work with the new administration. President Biden, once he's sworn into office, will be my 3rd American president. We've demonstrated an ability to stand up and defend Canadian interests throughout, which we will do as we move forward.
En suivi, Lina.
Merci. Et qu'est-ce que vous pensez du fait que M. Trump n'a toujours pas concédé la victoire, du fait qu'il semble s'accrocher?
Je pense que vous savez que ma responsabilité, c'est d'être là pour défendre les intérêts canadiens et c'est ce que je vais faire à chaque étape.
Thank you. Operator, next question on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Boris Proulx, Le Devoir. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. J'aimerais, toujours sur la même question de l'élection américaine, savoir si c'est envisageable pour vous de vous rétracter si jamais il s'avère que ce ne soit pas Joe Biden qui a été élu à la suite du recomptage.
Comme j'ai dit, nous avons confiance dans les processus et le système électoral américain. J'ai été content de féliciter le vice-président Biden, le président élu Biden cette fin de semaine. Mais évidemment, nous allons continuer de travailler avec l'administration actuelle jusqu'au 20 janvier.
Qu'est-ce que vous dites aux Canadiens qui sont peut-être sceptiques face à la manière dont l'élection s'est produite aux États-Unis et qui trouvent que c'est trop rapide d'avoir félicité le président élu Joe Biden?
Je pense que les gens doivent être rassurés qu'il y a des experts et des processus intègres à travers les États-Unis qui font leur travail dans des élections parfois difficiles. Et une fois que la déclaration a été faite clairement comme elle a été faite en fin de semaine, nous pouvons être assez certains des résultats. I think it's important to remind people of the strength of American democratic systems and the institutions designed to evaluate and analyze election results, tabulate election results. We have confidence in the processes that have operated in the United States, and we'll continue to demonstrate that.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Justin Ling, freelance. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. We have a new report out from criminologist Tony Dube that basically says that the solitary confinement regime in Canada's prisons hasn't substantially changed since our new legislation came online, and that in many respects, you're still not adhering to what the courts in Ontario and BC has instructed your government to do. So considering all of that, are you going to wait for another round of litigation on this? Or is this something your government is going to intervene on and ensure that the charter rights of inmates are being respected?
We made a commitment many years ago to move forward on ending solitary confinement, moving forward with new regimes. Obviously, that's a process that is very much underway, but as reports come out that highlight that there is still more to do, we will continue to work on that. Defending the charter rights of Canadians is always important to this government.
Following up.
In 2015, you, in your mandate letter to the Public Safety Minister, said that you wanted to respect the inquiry into the death of Ashley Smith. You said you wanted to respect the court rulings in BC and Ontario, but you haven't actually implemented any safeguards that correspond with Ashley Smith's inquiry. So, why are you continuing to say that you're looking to improve the system when the system isn't even designed to comport with what you yourself said you wanted to do?
We made a commitment to end solitary confinement, and we've moved forward on that. Obviously, there is always more work to do to ensure that Canadians' charter rights are being properly defended, and we will continue to do that.
Merci. On va maintenant passer pour les questions dans la salle.
Hello, Prime Minister. It's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. It's now been exactly 700 days since the two Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, were detained in what's widely believed to be a retaliation for the arrest of Meng Wanzhou. Do you intend to have a conversation with the President-elect about these two men? And do you have any reason to believe that President Biden's new foreign policy will include greater pressure on Beijing and potentially even an intervention in Meng Wanzhou's extradition case?
We have worked very closely with the current American administration over the past many, many months. And indeed, we've worked with allies around the world to put pressure on China around the arbitrary detention of two Canadian citizens. Their approach around coercive diplomacy is ineffective and extremely preoccupying for democratic nations around the world, and we have all expressed that very clearly. I am extremely confident that the incoming American administration will continue to be a good partner to Canada and other nations around the world as we look to impress upon China the approach they are taking is simply not working, while at the same time impressing upon them the importance of returning the two Canadians who've been arbitrarily detained for over 700 days now.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Ça fait bien des mois que nous travaillons de façon extrêmement proche avec l'administration américaine actuelle sur le cas des Canadiens en détention arbitraire en Chine et d'ailleurs avec nos alliés à travers le monde pour souligner que cette approche de détention arbitraire, de diplomatie coercitive est inefficace et contre-productive pour les Chinois et tout simplement erronée et mauvaise pour le monde. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec tous nos partenaires, y compris l'administration qui va entrer en fonction à partir du 20 janvier, sur le dossier de la Chine et sur le dossier plus particulièrement des deux Michael détenus de façon injuste.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Joe Biden a promis une stratégie Buy American d'approvisionnement de 400 milliards de dollars. Le protectionnisme ne s'en va pas nécessairement avec M. Trump. Qu'est-ce que vous allez lui dire quand vous allez lui parler pour le convaincre d'inclure les industries et les entreprises canadiennes. Et c'est quoi votre stratégie, au fond, là-dessus?
Je pense qu'on a vu que même depuis 4 ans, sous une administration très protectionniste, on a pu développer des solutions en partenariat qui ont eu énormément de bénéfices pour les Canadiens. On a pu signer un nouvel accord de l'ALENA qui garantit notre accès au marché américain pour les décennies à venir. On a aussi pu pousser contre les tarifs injustes qu'ils ont mis à 2 reprises sur nos travailleurs d'aluminium et d'autres. Et donc, nous avons développé des façons très robustes de défendre les intérêts des Canadiens, particulièrement en soulignant les avantages pour les compagnies, les travailleurs américains, de continuer à avoir un accès libre entre nos 2 pays. Nous allons démontrer, encore une fois, à quel point l'intégration de notre économie veut dire que des limites sur le commerce entre le Canada et les États-Unis fait mal à nos 2 pays. Et donc, toujours, on devrait chercher à approfondir nos liens et assurer qu'on travaille ensemble dans un marché de plus en plus compétitif à l'échelle mondiale.
English, please.
I think one of the things we demonstrated over the past 4 years was that even under a fairly protectionistic American administration, we were able to stand up for Canadian jobs and interests. We renegotiated our most important free trade agreement with NAFTA in a way that defended Canadian access to the U.S. market and continues to highlight Canadian interests, from our cultural exemptions to our auto sector, to a broad range of intellectual property protections that are really important for Canadians. We also stood up in a few different occasions to push back against unjust tariffs brought in by this current American president to defend our steel workers and our aluminum workers, and we will continue to be there to defend Canadian interests. But the fundamental argument that we made every step of the way over the past 4 years and will continue to make into the future is the fact that creating or imposing barriers on trade between Canada and the U.S. not only hurts Canada, but also hurts workers and companies in the United States. The integration of our supply chains, the close collaboration and cooperation between businesses and people on both sides of the border means it's always better for us to have free-flowing goods and opportunities on both sides of the border as we work together to succeed in an increasingly competitive global market.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. On the Pfizer vaccine, these initial successful results we're seeing, is that going to mean Canada is going to be ordering more of this particular vaccine? Can you talk about the timelines of how long it's going to take to get as much as we need? And also, just as my understanding is that this vaccine has to be stored at very low temperatures. I'm wondering what steps we're taking to store it and to distribute it.
We have secured access to a broad range of vaccine candidates. Indeed, Canada is one of the countries around the world with the very best portfolio of potential vaccines, because we know that there is a certain amount of uncertainty as to which vaccines will land first, which vaccines will be most effective, which vaccines will be best suited to different segments of the population. And that's why having a range of vaccines and having secured hundreds of millions of doses in advance is what is our responsibility to make sure that Canadians are safe and are well served once vaccines start to arrive. Indeed, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine candidate has published some very promising results and seems to be moving forward quickly. We've secured already millions of doses of that vaccine candidate. And when it is safe to distribute, we will certainly be beginning distribution in Canada to high priority groups. That is most likely to happen in Q1 or in the first 3 months of 2021. But of course, there is a lot of uncertainty involved in these processes. In regards to this particular vaccine candidate, indeed, it needs to be stored at about 75 below 0 Celsius in order to be kept stable. And therefore, the logistical distribution of this vaccine candidate will require some very careful cooperation with provinces and with supply chains in order to be able to get it out to Canadians on a priority basis. We are already working on those necessary logistical supports, but obviously compared to potential later vaccines that will be much more stable at room temperatures, the logistics on this first vaccine are likely to be more complex and slightly more limiting in terms of where we can get this candidate out to than some subsequent ones. But as you know, we're going to continue to work to be there for a broad range of, to help all Canadians with a broad range of candidates.
Francis.
Comme vous savez peut-être, le Canada est parmi un des pays qui a pu conclure le plus d'accords et qui a un portfolio de vaccins potentiels le plus varié et sécure de tous les pays dans le monde. C'est parce que nous savons que l'accès à un vaccin et un bon vaccin est essentiel pour les Canadiens. Et donc, nous avons différents types et différents échéanciers, mais certainement, il y a des nouvelles positives par rapport au vaccin Pfizer and BioNTech qui sont sortis ce matin. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec eux et d'autres. On a sécurisé plusieurs millions de candidats d'exemplaires de ce vaccin-là et on s'attend à ce que ça arrive normalement dans les 3 premiers mois de 2021. Évidemment, on va commencer avec des populations prioritaires pour les vaccinations, mais on devrait en avoir de plus en plus au fil des mois, y compris avec d'autres potentiels candidats vaccins. Par rapport au vaccin Pfizer, effectivement, on doit le garder à moins 65 degrés Celsius pour qu'il reste stable. Et donc, la distribution va amener quelques complexités logistiques qui vont devoir être assurées. Mais nous sommes en train de travailler avec les provinces pour assurer qu'on a la capacité de distribuer ce vaccin à des cibles prioritaires.
Bonjour, Raymond Filion de TVA. 2 questions. D'abord, sur Pfizer, vous avez parlé de millions de doses. Avez-vous un chiffre pour dès le début, dès que le vaccin sera disponible? Et ensuite, deuxième question, la victoire de M. Biden, diriez-vous que c'est de bon augure pour la lutte contre les changements climatiques?
Par rapport à Pfizer, je sais qu'on a sécurisé plusieurs millions de doses, mais ce n'est qu'une première vague. Évidemment, si ça fonctionne, on va en acheter encore plus quand ce sera disponible. Par rapport à la nouvelle administration américaine, on sait que c'est une priorité pour bien des gens à travers le monde de continuer la lutte contre les changements climatiques tout en protégeant les emplois et en créant l'économie de l'avenir. Et les paroles et les intentions du président Biden là-dessus sont certainement du président élu Biden là-dessus sont certainement le bienvenu. I think people around the world know how important it is to move forward on fighting climate change and ensuring economic growth and jobs for people as we transform our energy mix and our economies. It is a welcome sign that the new president-elect has indicated that climate change is a top priority of his.
Prime Minister, there were multiple deaths this weekend at a Winnipeg care home. Police are investigating reports that people were laying dead for hours. You keep talking about a federal standard for long-term care, but there doesn't seem to be any action on this. Are you not partially responsible for the fact that this keeps happening in Canada?
We recognize the responsibilities that provinces have on long-term care issues. The Constitution designates that as a provincial responsibility, an area of provincial responsibility. But of course, the federal government is deeply concerned with the tragedies we've seen coming out of Winnipeg, with the tragedies we've seen come out of long-term care centers across this country, which is why we made the Army available in the early days of the pandemic in both Quebec and Ontario, while we've moved forward with the Canadian Red Cross to be there for installations and institutions in difficulties, and why we continue to work with the provinces and impress upon the provinces how it's important to share best practices and move towards a long-term care standards.
Minister Michael Couture with Global National. Over the last few years, you've had a pretty decent relationship with President Trump. He's still refused to concede and contest these election results. Have you called him? And more precisely, what's your message to President Trump as he continues this challenge?
My message to every American president is that I will work to defend Canadian interests. That's my job. My job is to make sure that we're working well with the current administration and that we will work well with the incoming administration. That's what Canadians expect of me.
Prime Minister Lee Berthium, Canadian Press. We've seen case counts for COVID climbing across the country and reaching record levels. You've continually called for Canadians to double down, including today. But do you think that provinces need to take stronger action? And at what point does the federal government step in? And if so, how?
The provinces have the responsibility for making local health decisions and determining what closes down and when. What the federal government does, and what the federal government has done from the very beginning, is made it easier for local health authorities to make the right decisions quickly by committing to be there to support people who lose their jobs because of the pandemic, people who are facing challenges to their businesses because of this COVID-19 crisis. The federal government will be there to support. We've recently announced even extra supports for jurisdictions that choose to shut down because we don't want local public health officials to have to face between impossible choices between keeping Canadians safe and keeping businesses viable. The federal government is there to support businesses. We are there to support Canadians so that local public health officials can make the right decisions quickly. Because ultimately, the best way to protect the economy is by protecting Canadians' health and reducing the spread of COVID-19. Les provinces ont la responsabilité de choisir quoi fermer et comment rapidement ils vont agir, mais le gouvernement fédéral a compris que sa responsabilité, depuis les tout débuts, était d'être là pour faciliter cette décision pour les autorités locales, en garantissant que les Canadiens qui perdent leur emploi vont avoir de l'appui du gouvernement fédéral, en garantissant que des entreprises et des petites entreprises qui doivent fermer à cause de la COVID, partiellement ou complètement, vont avoir l'appui du gouvernement fédéral. On est là pour aider les autorités locales à prendre la bonne décision rapidement, qui n'est pas à choisir entre le bien-être économique des communautés et le bien-être en termes de santé et de COVID. C'est un enjeu qu'on va continuer de faire et même on a investi encore plus pour assurer que là où les autorités locales doivent fermer les entreprises, on va être là encore plus pour aider ces entreprises-là. Donc, nous savons, puisque nous savons que la meilleure façon de protéger l'économie, la meilleure façon de protéger les entreprises à travers ce pays, c'est de réduire les éclosions de la COVID-19, de garder tout ça sous contrôle et d'assurer la santé de tous les Canadiens.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. C'est tout le temps que vous avez avec nous aujourd'hui. On va continuer maintenant la période de questions pour les ministres en commençant par le téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Ryan Tumulty, National Post, line open.
Yeah, good morning. I guess this question is probably best directed at Minister Bains. I'm wondering, with the vaccine order, when the Pfizer deal was announced, the government said that it had 20 million doses with options and was trying to negotiate options for more. Did those negotiations conclude? Did we get options for more vaccine?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And as we've indicated from the outset, we've been very clear in terms of our vaccine strategy. We want to have a diverse portfolio looking at all the different vaccine candidates internationally, as well as supporting Canadian vaccine candidates as well, so that once these candidates proceed and we're in a position to distribute them to the population, that we have that optionality. And so with respect to Pfizer, we're continuing to engage with them and looking at that additional optionality. But I can say that we are in a position where we have secured a significant number of doses with not only one vaccine candidate, but several of them. And we'll keep Canadians apprised of how the situation unfolds.
Sorry, so then would it be fair to say that we don't have doses beyond the initial 20 million confirmed at this point?
I would say if you look at our overall portfolio, we have over 300 million doses for different vaccine candidates, including the Pfizer vaccine candidate. And as we move forward with engaging with the company to determine additional doses that may be required, we'll update Canadians on that progress. But I think it's important to note that there's going to be several vaccine candidates that are going to show a lot of promise, and that Canada is well positioned to be able to secure the necessary doses for Canadians.
All right, thank you. Now we'll go back to the room.
Hi, it's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. My question is for you, Minister Bains. Today, your announcement is all about getting high-speed internet access to Canadians, but people in rural areas right now are already facing extremely high fees, much higher than people in the downtown cores. So I'm wondering what your government is going to be doing to ensure that all of these Canadians who are now going to be getting high-speed internet are not going to be paying extremely exorbitant prices by companies trying to make more money.
Well, thank you very much for your question. I think it's really important to note that access to high-speed internet connectivity is essential, and that's why we made the significant announcement today, looking at different ways to support Canadians to get quality access to high-speed internet connectivity, but at an affordable price. And what we want to do in order to achieve that is promote competition. And one of the ways we've done so is, as you've seen today, is working with different internet service providers, as well as looking at Telesat as a solution for low Earth orbit satellites, as well as Starlink. And we provided that company as well with access to spectrum so they can provide those services to these communities. So we feel the competition from all these different service providers will enable the price points to go down and be more affordable for Canadians, particularly in rural and remote communities.
Hi. I'm not sure which minister will take it, but I'll throw my first question out there. This is not a new promise from your government or previous governments. Like, why did it take a global pandemic to get this done finally?
I think Minister Monsef will answer this one.
Happy to. Thank you for your question. Since 2015, our government's investments have, as the Prime Minister said, added up to being 10 times higher than all previous governments combined. There are tens of thousands of households that will be connected by the end of this year, about 250,000 plus by the end of next year. And we're not going to stop until we connect every single household to this essential service. The program we're announcing today also includes a rapid response stream. That's $150 million that's going to provide every community across this country who's got shovel-ready projects ready to go with an opportunity to apply and get connected within the next year.
And just as a follow-up, I'm not sure who is going to be taking this, but I know you announced Telesat as helping in this. But in terms of also building other infrastructure, where are we on the 5G announcement, and is Huawei still in the running?
I think it's important to know there's different aspects to the questions you asked. When it comes to internet connectivity, as my colleague has mentioned, we've made significant investments. We've also demonstrated significant progress through the Connect to Innovate program that we launched a few years ago. And we're also investing in new technologies like low Earth orbit satellites. So we feel that these different programs and initiatives and the investments that we're making are going to provide that high-speed internet connectivity where you have 50 download and 10 upload for megabits per second, which is important. And we think it's critical for Canadians as they go online for work, to learn, to shop, to access essential services. And with respects to 5G, we know this technology has a lot of potential, and we want to make sure that it's deployed in a safe and secure manner. And we continue to work with our allies, continue to engage with national security experts to make sure that when we move forward in a manner that we do so in a way that protects the interests of Canadians. There's no particular update or announcement that I have on 5G today, but when we do, we'll definitely share that with you and with Canadians as well.
Robertson of the Winnipeg Free Press. I have a question and a follow-up about UBF. I'm wondering, in the context of Manitoba, the CTI project collapsed, the Wikidoak Clear Sky Partnership. I'm just wondering if there's anything that you guys have learned from that to sort of prevent that from repeating again.
That's an excellent question. This program is a program designed by Canadians, for Canadians, with our rural MPs, including those in Manitoba, having played a really significant role in it all. We also took into account what the report that came out a few years ago said about, broadly speaking, how to connect every Canadian household to this essential service. We heard that the processes need to be streamlined and more easily accessible, that many small communities didn't have capacity to put forward applications. So we're offering a Pathfinder service, a concierge service for those communities to call and navigate this very complex process. We heard that our maps needed to be more precise. The hexagon model is gone and our maps are even more precise now, and we're sharing that with applicants. We also heard that there are a lot of cooks in this kitchen across the country, and rightfully so. This is a complex infrastructure project. This is a big, beautiful country with a lot of diverse needs, so diverse tools are needed to get there, and that somebody needs to coordinate all the different partners. The federal government's stepping up to provide that coordination. We heard that we needed to act faster. The rapid response does that. And we also heard that communities are rightfully so impatient to see progress. And today we're launching a tracker to show progress on these projects moving forward.
Thank you for the thorough answer. And I just had a follow-up about the delay in the funding. This was announced in Budget 2019. You had mentioned, the in the coming days comment back in June about this being open. I'm just trying to understand what the holdup was.
Well, we have supported connectivity in hundreds of communities even before the pandemic. And actually, we were ready to go in March with the new Universal Broadband Fund. And then the pandemic hit. And we had to go back and listen to municipalities, mayors and councils telling us that they've got a lot on their plates and that we need to ensure that there's a personalized service there for them to help navigate the process. We also heard that projects needed to be processed even faster, and so that rapid response stream had to be put forward. I will say this, though. Even during the pandemic, these projects have been moving forward. And I'm going to take this opportunity to thank the essential workers who've been, digging wires into the ground despite the pandemic to ensure that more Canadians are connected to this essential service.
Excuse me, Lee Berthium, Canadian Press. Minister Bains, I wanted to ask you about the negotiations between the government and the airlines about a federal aid package. Can you say whether the LEAF program will make up part of the financial support? And if that's unlikely, can you say why it's unlikely?
So I think it's important to know that the economic fallout associated with the pandemic has had a significantly negative impact on the airline industry. It's actually been devastated. And I know this personally because Pearson International Airport is in my riding, in the constituency, in the community that I represent. And we've seen a significant decline in air travel. And so this sector is going through some very challenging times. You've also heard very clearly from my colleague, Minister Garneau, that as we engage with this industry to think through the long-term recovery, and we have to be mindful of that the recovery is not going to take a few months, but several years for this airline industry because of the nature of travel and the border restrictions that are in place. And as we find a vaccine and move forward with that distribution to build confidence for travel, we need to support the sector for the long term. And we're also looking at the issues of refunds. We're looking at the issues with respects to regional routes and routes that we want to examine, looking at support for airports. And so those are key elements. And one other element that's definitely being discussed is support for the broader aerospace sector as well. So not only the airline industry, but aerospace as well, to make sure that these airline industries, the airlines continue to support our aerospace sector as well. And so all that to say is it's very complicated. It's integrated in terms of all these different issues. And we're going to continue to work with this sector. But one of the areas we definitely have made very clear is we want refunds for customers if the airline industry wants meaningful support. And we've also been very clear that we want support for the aerospace sector. That means we want to support the vibrant sector that exists in different parts of the country for building planes. And we'll look at different optionalities, as you said, the LEAF program in terms of liquidity support, because that's a big ask from the sector, is that they have the cash flow to deal with operational costs and fixed costs going forward for, like I said, not months, but years. And we're willing to have that conversation, but we have a clear position with regards to refunds, as well as support for the aerospace sector.
And you mentioned refunds for customers. Was wondering, will airline refunds come at the expense of Canadian taxpayers? In other words, will airlines that owe hundreds of millions of dollars in refunds be receiving more cash from the government to be able to pay for those refunds?
I think there's two issues there. One is we want to make it very clear, and Canadians have been very clear with us, that any support for the sector that is going through a very challenging time, that they step up and support Canadians who are also struggling, and that these refunds should be provided to their customers as soon as possible. So this is one issue that we put right at the beginning of our conversations with the airline industry to say, you need to address this issue. And then our goal and objective is to make sure we have a competitive airline industry. So when we do have the economic recovery and when we do have the rebound, that we have a strong rebound and a strong airline industry. But the connection of these two issues is very different and very separate. One goal is to make sure that customers are treated fairly and with respect and they get their refunds. Secondly is to make sure we have a broad support for the air sector as well as the airline industry. And those are separate issues that we're going to address in the coming weeks and months.
Hi, Ministers. Tom Perry with CBC. On this low Earth satellite equipment you're going to be doing, how complicated is that? Is that just flicking a switch? Is it buying more bandwidth off the companies? Like, when are people going to see the impact of that? And I guess on the ground, you're talking about shovel-ready projects. When are people going to start feeling the impact of this announcement today?
So I think Minister Monsef can speak to the shovel-ready projects. Okay. With regards to low Earth orbit satellites, we've made a big bet as a government to support this technology through Telesat. We've provided them with $85 million through the Strategic Innovation Fund for research and development. And according to MIT, when they assessed, for example, other low Earth orbit satellite technologies, Telesat is far more advanced. It's more reliable, more efficient. And so we're very proud of that. And we're very proud of the fact that these LEOs will be launched late next year and will be available to communities in 2022, particularly those remote and rural communities where the fiber backbone infrastructure economics doesn't make sense. And because these LEOs are so close to the Earth's orbit, only 2,000 kilometers in some instances, it deals with the latency issue. And it deals with speed as well in a meaningful way. So it can create and provide meaningful options for high-speed internet connectivity. So this is a very promising technology. It's great to see a Canadian company play a leadership role in this. We've supported the research and development for it. And these satellites will be deployed next year, late next year. And in terms of there will be a technical briefing as well to talk about how complex these are, but it's incredible technology. And it's made in Canada technology that we're very proud of.
Thanks for your question, Tom. As I said, Canadians are feeling the impact of our previous investments as we speak. The new rapid response stream, though, is in direct response to the hundreds of letters and emails. Pablo spoke about some of those stories. The Prime Minister shared some of those stories. And we're ready to accept applications today. And we will process those applications on an ongoing basis so that there's no delay in that process. So if you have a good idea on how to get connected and your project is shovel ready and your community is on board, reach out to us because we're here to help.
Let's ask as a follow-up. One of the things we've heard since the pandemic started was that even in southern communities, even in big cities, there's a big divide between kids going to school who have access to computers, who have access to high speed, and those who don't. And I know that today's announcement's not really about that, but is there more that you can do to help kids like that, kids who are in need, to get access to high speed?
So you're absolutely right in your assessment. If you look at high-speed connectivity, the divide is fairly significant between urban and rural Canada. 41% of rural Canadians have access to high-speed internet connectivity. So that's when you take the 50-10, 50 download, 10 upload megabits per second. And 98% have high-speed internet connectivity in urban parts of Canada. And so that digital divide is fairly stark. And what we recognize is, of course, we want to provide solutions around connectivity, but we also want to make sure they have additional tools. So one program that we're very proud of is Computers for Schools, to make sure that young people also have access to technologies and the latest computers as well, and also looking at affordability. In urban communities, having access to high-speed internet connectivity is important, but in some cases, for some families, it's economically challenging. It's tough to pay the price points for some of these connections. And so we've introduced a $10 per month plan with the telecommunication companies, looking at those families through the Canada Child Benefit and targeting those families to make sure that they have access to this $10 per month plan. And so that plan, coupled with support through investments in computers, we think helps deal with some of those other issues pertaining to access to high-speed internet connectivity.
OK, merci. Cela mettra fin à la conférence de presse. That ends the press conference. Thank you.